It wasn't the fact that the house was abandoned that caught my attention. Abandoned houses exist in every neighborhood. Some are forgotten, others are just waiting for a new owner. But that one seemed to follow a routine. Every night, exactly after midnight, a light would turn on in one of the upstairs rooms, and that made no sense at all. The house had been empty for years. No car, no furniture, no for sale sign. The external wiring had been cut. I knew that because I had asked. And yet, the light turned on. At first I ignored it. Then I started paying attention. And when I realized the light seemed to react to my presence, I understood it wasn't just curiosity. Something in that house was awake. I moved to that neighborhood for one simple reason: cheap rent and silence. After years of living next to busy roads, sirens, and constant traffic, silence felt almost unnatural. The kind of silence where you notice things you usually ignore: the hum of a refrigerator, the distant bark of a dog, the wind brushing against dry leaves. The streets were narrow and uneven, old sidewalks cracked by time and tree roots. Houses sat far apart, most of them older than they looked, with porches that creaked even when no one was sitting on them. At night, the neighborhood seemed to shrink. Streetlights were few and weak, casting long shadows that didn't quite line up with the shapes that created them. Most houses went dark early. By 11, the street outside my window was usually empty. The abandoned house stood directly across from my building. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't isolated. It was simply there. An old two-story American house, wooden siding peeling away in layers, tall, narrow windows that reflected the sky during the day and swallowed light at night, rusted iron bars on the lower windows, bent slightly outward, as if someone once tried to leave in a hurry. During the day it looked harmless, forgotten, just another house that time had passed by. But at night it felt different. Not threatening, just aware. The first time I noticed the light, I didn't think much of it. I was already in bed, half asleep, staring at the ceiling, when something changed in the room. A faint glow brushed against the wall near my closet. At first I thought it was a car passing by. But the light didn't move. I sat up slowly and pulled the curtain aside. That's when I saw it. A single upstairs window in the abandoned house was glowing. A dull yellowish light, not bright, not flickering, just on. It felt out of place, like seeing a lit room in a building you know should be empty. So I stood there for a while, trying to rationalize it. Maybe someone had broken in, maybe squatters, maybe a short-term electrical issue. It didn't feel urgent enough to investigate. The next morning, over coffee, I mentioned it casually to the neighbor downstairs. She was older, quiet, the kind of person who noticed things but didn't comment on them. When I mentioned the light, she stopped what she was doing. She looked at me longer than necessary. Then she said calmly, "That house has no residents." I asked her how she knew. She didn't answer that. When I asked about the light, she shrugged and said it was probably a reflection from a street lamp. But there was no street lamp in that direction. And I knew reflections. This wasn't one. After that conversation, I couldn't stop noticing it. The light didn't appear every night at first, or maybe it did and I just wasn't paying attention. But once I started looking for it, the pattern became impossible to ignore. It always turned on after midnight. Not 11:58, not 12:03, after midnight. And it always turned off before sunrise. Never stayed on long enough for morning light to touch it. Always the same room, the same window. Watching became part of my routine. Before brushing my teeth, I checked. Before getting into bed, I checked again. If the window was dark, I felt an odd sense of relief, like everything was still normal. If the light was on, my chest felt tight. Not fear exactly, more like anticipation, as if something was happening without me. Curiosity slowly turned into something else. I didn't decide to test the light all at once. It happened naturally, almost accidentally. One night I left my window open and turned off every light in my room. I stood perfectly still, letting my eyes adjust. The abandoned house remained lit. Another night I left my room fully illuminated, lamps on, bathroom light on, as if I were awake and moving around. Then I stepped away from the window for several minutes. When I came back, the light across the street was gone. That was the first time the situation crossed a line. It wasn't reacting randomly. It was reacting to me. I didn't feel scared yet. I felt observed. Once I noticed that, everything else followed. The curtain in that upstairs room never moved. Not once. even on windy nights when trees bent and branches scraped against walls. The light never spilled into the hallway, never leaked into another room. It felt isolated, contained, as if the rest of the house was empty in a different way. Then one night the routine broke. The light turned on earlier than usual, and when I leaned closer to the glass, it flickered. Just once, not like a faulty bulb, like a response. That night I couldn't sleep. Around 1 in the morning, I put on a jacket and stepped outside. The street felt wider than usual, quieter, as if sound itself was avoiding the area. The house looked taller up close, older. The light was on. The gate was locked, heavy, old padlock, no signs of forced entry. When I looked up at the window, the light went out. The sudden darkness felt deliberate. I stood there longer than I should have. Then another light turned on. Not the same room, deeper inside the house, further back, as if something had moved. That's when the idea settled in my mind. Whatever was happening inside that house was aware of where I stood. And it didn't want to be seen. After that, I stopped trying to understand. On my last night there, I woke up without knowing why. 12:17 a.m. I walked to the window. The house was fully illuminated. Every room, as if it had been waiting. One window upstairs was open, but there was no movement, only darkness behind the light. I turned off my bedroom light. The house went dark at the same time. Then one light returned, facing me. I moved out 2 days later. Different neighborhood, different street. But sometimes when I wake up at night, the kitchen light is already on, and I still need a moment to remember that I live alone.